All right, let's dive into this wild story. The Hummer, right? From military tough guy to, well, it became kind of a poster child for excess. We're digging into this using the article The Rise and Fall of the Hummer, a 20-year journey of excess and obsession. I mean, who'd have thought a vehicle built for war zones would end up, a symbol of, well,
Extremes, right. It definitely is a story of extremes. Starting with the Humvee, its military roots, this thing was made to conquer the toughest terrain, not exactly your everyday grocery getter.
so this beastly Humvee is where it all began. But how did it go from, like, desert battles to battling for parking spots at the mall?
Well, you got to go back to the Gulf War in the early 90s. The Humvee, or HMMWV, a high-mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicle, really proved itself then. That image of it, powerful and reliable, carrying troops across the desert, it was everywhere, broadcast worldwide.
So war hero tons celebrity, huh? I can see the appeal.
Oh, absolutely. And nobody was more into it than Arnold Schwarzenegger. Huge fan, convinced AM General, the company making the Humvee, to make a civilian version, even bought the very first one.
No way, Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's wild. The Terminator himself pushing the Hummer to the public. But that first Hummer, the H1, that must have been a tough sell for most people.
Yeah, pricey, not exactly fuel efficient. And parking it, you practically needed a pilot's license. But it had that cool factor, you can't deny that. And it did find its fans, a small but dedicated group who loved it.
So like an exclusive club for those who wanted to stand out and had a garage big enough to fit it.
Exactly. But then, 1999, General Motors steps in, everything changes, they buy the Hummer brand, and that's when things really explode.
Okay, now things are getting interesting.
GM saw the potential to make the Hummer appeal to, well, more people. They launched the H2 smaller, a bit easier on the wallet, slightly more practical.
Slightly being the key word there, I imagine.
True, but that small change, it made all the difference. Suddenly you have celebrities like LeBron James driving H2s, and then there's that unforgettable scene in Bad Boys 2.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Pure over-the-top action. The Hummer was like a character in the movie itself. Early 2000s, the Hummer becomes the symbol of excess. Like it fit right in with that whole era of, what do they call it, conspicuous consumption.
It's true, if you want to make a statement, the H2 was the way to do it.
But we all know what goes up must come down, right?
Sadly, yes, and the Hummer's fall was just as dramatic as its rise.
So what happened? What was the turning point? Why did this seemingly unstoppable vehicle just crash?
Well, a bunch of factors hit all at once, kind of like a perfect storm. First, fuel inefficiency. Hummer's got a bad reputation for guzzling gas, especially when gas prices went crazy in the mid-2000s. Then you had the recession, people tightening their belts. Not the best time to be driving a vehicle that screamed expensive.
Yeah, not exactly fitting in with the whole frugal living vibe.
Right, and on top of all that, environmental awareness was growing. The Hummer, with its size and terrible gas mileage, it became a target for being out of touch with concerns about climate change.
So not just practical concerns, but a shift in values too. People starting to care more about sustainability, and the Hummer just didn't fit in.
Exactly. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, the guy who championed the Hummer, he ended up selling most of his Hummers because of all the negative attention.
Wow, if the Terminator's giving up on the Hummer, you know it's serious. It's kind of funny. A vehicle built to survive almost anything couldn't adapt to changing times and perceptions.
Ironic, isn't it? The Hummer, a victim of its own success, it was so tied to a certain era, a certain mindset, it just couldn't escape its image.
But that wasn't the end, was it? 2020, GM brings back the Hummer. But this time as an electric vehicle. Talk about a twist.
Yeah, a bold move for sure. Almost like the Hummer's trying to redeem itself.
Right. Can a vehicle that was all about excess become, like, a symbol of sustainability?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
And speaking of comebacks, we got to talk about that Super Bowl commercial announcing the Hummer EV.
Oh yeah, the one with LeBron James. Pretty clever, connecting the Hummer's past with this electric future.
Exactly. They were playing on that nostalgia, but also trying to tap into, well, the growing concern for the environment. Was it just marketing or a genuine attempt at reinvention? What do you think?
Well, it does highlight some of the challenges the Hummer EV faces. I mean, it still has a lot of what made the original controversial. It's big, it's heavy, it's not exactly cheap.
So some might say it's still excessive, even if it's electric.
Yeah, that's a valid point. And it brings up a big question. Can the Hummer EV escape its past? Can they convince people it's not just about status anymore?
It seems like they're trying to appeal to both, nostalgia, but also this desire for something new, innovative,
It's a tough balancing act, for sure.
like walking a tightrope.
On one hand, they want that iconic Hummer image, mugged, go anywhere. But on the other hand, they need to show it's a responsible choice, environmentally speaking.
So they want to have their cake and eat it too, huh?
Basically.
It's interesting, this tension between past and future. It's something a lot of brands are dealing with, especially car companies.
Absolutely. This shift towards electric vehicles is huge. And a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to adapt. you know.
And the Hummer, it's such a unique case. It was so tied to excess, to gas guzzling. What does this all mean for the Hummer EV, do you think?
It's hard to say for sure if it'll be a hit. Sales haven't reached those H2 levels, but they're not bad either.
So there's hope.
Definitely potential. The electric vehicle market's growing fast, and people love SUVs. So the Hummer EV is in a good spot. But ultimately, it comes down to consumers. Are they willing to embrace this new, more eco-conscious Hummer?
It's like a social experiment almost. Can a brand really reinvent itself, shed its old image?
And it's not just about the brand, it's about us too, right? As consumers, are we ready to accept a Hummer that's not about excess? A Hummer that's about sustainability, responsibility?
That's a good point. It makes you think about what we value in a vehicle and how those values change over time.
And it goes beyond cars. You see this kind of brand reinvention everywhere.
Oh yeah, like fashion brands going sustainable, food companies focusing on health. It's fascinating how brands try to adapt to these changing values.
And it's not always easy. Sometimes it feels authentic, sometimes it feels forced, you know?
Like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly. That's what makes the Hummer EV so interesting. It's a gamble, and we'll have to see if it pays off.
We've talked about the Hummer's past, its fall, its unexpected comeback as an EV. But what about the future? Can the Hummer EV really shake off its past? Or is it destined to be a relic, a reminder of when bigger was always better?
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Can the Hummer EV truly escape what it used to be?
You know, it's interesting. It goes beyond just this one car, this one brand. The Hummer's story, it's like a reflection of a bigger change happening. You see it everywhere: fashion, food, tech, this push and pull between hold on to the past and needing to adapt to a new world.
Right, it's like this constant question, what does it take for a brand to really change, to become something new? Not just the Hummer, but any brand. It's tricky. You got to acknowledge where you came from, but also convince people you're moving forward, evolving. And it can't just be talk. It's got to be real change.
Yeah, people can spot a fake from a mile away, right?
Exactly. So the Hummer EV, if it's going to make it, it needs to be more than just a familiar name and a fancy electric engine. It has to deliver on sustainability, on performance.
So what's it going to take? Can the Hummer EV win over a new generation of buyers? People who might not even remember the H2, you know? Or will it just be for like the diehard Hummer fans and those early adopters of everything new?
Hard to say for sure, but I think a lot depends on whether GM can reposition the Hummer brand. Think about Tesla. They didn't just make electric cars. They built this whole lifestyle around it. Innovation, sustainability.
That's true. It's not just the product, it's the whole image, the values that come with it.
Exactly. So can the Hummer, once all about excess, can it become a symbol of something different now? Something that connects with people who care about the planet, about the future?
I guess time will tell. But it's definitely a bold move, this Hummer EV. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
For sure. It reminds us that in a world that's always changing, nothing stays the same forever. Even icons can evolve.
Well, we've covered a lot: the Hummer's rise, its fall, the surprising comeback as an electric vehicle. And we're left with a lot of questions. What's next for the Hummer? Will it fade into history or become a symbol of a new era?
It's up to us, isn't it? As consumers, as a society, we decide what kind of future we want, what values will guide our choices.
That's a great point to end on, something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Hummer. We hope it gave you some new perspectives, maybe even spoke some questions of your own. Until next time.
As always, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment below. There are also some links in our description that you may find useful.